Yemi into the area, rounds the goalkeeper, empty net! A one-man counterattack that draws first blood.
This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Sahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellowwall podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 441 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and today we will talk about Borussia Dortmund beating Chelsea in the Champions League, and we will preview Sunday's game against Hertha Berlin after a brief recap of the Bremen game. That means 7 wins in a row, and for all that and more, joins me Lars Perlman. Hello Lars, how are you doing?
Hello Stefan, I'm fine, how are you?
I'm doing great, thank you very much. It's nice to be on this wave of W's, and I can't wait to talk about it. But beforehand, we do have a sponsor for this episode.
Wir sind komplett schuldenfrei, wir zahlen keinen einzigen Euro an Zinsen.
And this episode is sponsored by Official League. They make caps, hats, lids, whatever you want to call it. And they have just released their latest Borussia Dortmund collection after partnering with the club. And we are giving away a hat. So if you want to win your hat, you have to go to our Twitter page at Yellowwallpod and respond to our pinned tweet with code word Schmelzer. Again, code word Schmelzer. And follow at Official League on Twitter, which is of course also tagged in that tweet. And the winner will be announced on the next episode. And go check them out. Their website is officialleague.co. And the hats are really quite nice, and if you're a hat person, don't hesitate. I'm seeing a lot of giveaways from Official League, by the way. I think a lot of American-based fan clubs are doing those as well, so if you really want a hat, I think your chances are quite high that you get one, but just add the code word Schmelzer to this tweet, reply to it, or I don't know, if you add Schmelle or Goat, I will also count it. But with that, we can move on to the Champions League, and that of course started with a beautiful choreo where Borussia Dortmund the fans rather, the Yellow Wall did say that it's worth it to travel around with the club, but of course this was a home match, and it was a very feisty game. Lars, of course, a 1-0 win in the end. But what are your thoughts overall? And then I think we can talk a little bit more in depth about the game.
I mean, it's always difficult to just have general thoughts.
Fine.
If even, or especially when you preface it with our having or in an in-depth discussion later on. But I would say just generally speaking, I think that was quite fortunate for Dortmund to win this game. I think certainly a 1-1 draw, nothing to be angry with after those 95 or so minutes. I think Chelsea could have won the game as well. If, for example, they had spent, let's say, 40 of their 650 million this year on a decent striker, maybe they would have won the game, because there were a number of chances, especially for Joao Felix, that a competent number 9 would have put away. Not necessarily saying that Aubameyang would have, but he's kind of still there at Chelsea, but wasn't called
it
up for
would be the curse
League.
of the X, and he knows how to chip a ball, so just saying.
Yeah, but I guess that's the price you pay for moving to a club like Chelsea. I mean, for Dortmund, obviously, 1-0 win, quite a decent result in the first leg, but I would be very surprised if the same level of performance would be enough to make the quarterfinals at Stamford Bridge. So, luckily enough, there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of the performance, and whenever you win despite not playing particularly well, I think that's a pretty good feeling, especially as you alluded to earlier, 7 wins in a row, riding a certain wave of victories. It's nice to add to that when you don't even play that well.
Yeah, I must say I was a little bit surprised to see Sebastian Aller starting after he also played around, 60-ish minutes against Bremen. I thought maybe he'll come off the bench, but with Moukoko being out, I also feel like Terzic maybe didn't feel like starting Modest. But other than that, I think having Özcan, Bellingham and Emre Can in midfield was not a big surprise. Rafael Guerreiro and Marius Wolf, who returned from injury, being the fullbacks, and then you had Schlotterbeck and Süle, of course, in central defense, and of course I should not omit Julian Brandt and Karim Adeyemi. And I'm gonna say this: I thought the first half, I think the first 10 minutes or so were just very choppy, but other than that, I thought Dortmund were quite in control of the game. But that being said, they did allow a few very promising counter-attacking chances, and especially in the beginning, Nico Schlotterbeck had to intervene with a really nice sliding tackle on Mudryk. So yeah, you could feel from the very beginning, I found that Chelsea do have a lot of quality and a lot of individual quality, and they were sort of oozing it very early on. But I also thought that Dortmund did very well in midfield, in ball progression, maybe not really creating the final pass or the big chances, but there were certain moments of, say, Jude Bellingham or Julian Brandt and so on, and of course Marius Wolf, where they just, glided through midfield and beat opponents 1v1 and came into promising spaces. So to me, this setup, I think worked quite well in the first half. Obviously, you already mentioned that the overall performance wasn't best, but I think from the post-game interviews that I've seen, be it Emre Can, Jude Bellingham, also Edin Terzic, I think all admitted as much that they were a bit lucky here and there, but I still think there are positives to glean away from, because Dortmund did play some attractive football, obviously, every now and then in this game, and had some okay ball retention, some okay ball circulation, and played with a speed that also did challenge Chelsea and put them on the back foot for quite a bit. So I thought from that standpoint, there are some positives to glean away from. But when I said in depth, I don't know how in depth I want to go, because I mean, it's a Champions League game. It's very special. The atmosphere was crazy. But again, it wasn't like a big tactical chess match or any of that. I found, I don't know. If you have any super detailed observations you want to share, be my guest. But from the top of my head, I don't really have that much to offer, if I'm honest.
No, I think the interesting part to me anyway was, as you said, Chelsea, a lot of attacking quality, but as I said, not anyone to finish those chances. And from Dortmund's perspective, I think definitely commendable in terms of the spirit of defending as a unit and all that stuff, which is kind of hard to talk about because, okay, we now mentioned it and there's not much to analyze, but still something to be praised. And maybe in terms of individual performances, I think it was quite telling that Chelsea's 120 million euro man, Enzo Fernandez, who's an incredible player, had a great World Cup for Argentina and all that stuff, has been brilliant for Benfica in the first half of the season. He looked kind of lost, facing what I would assume is right now perhaps the best German outfield player in Julian Brandt.
Yeah.
And he was also kind of shown up a bit by Bellingham, who I would say overall had a bit of a quieter game. And even in the few duels Enzo had with Can or Özcan, I don't think you necessarily saw someone who or whom a club just paid 120 million euros for. So obviously there's always two sides to that medal. So I would assume that Enzo just didn't have a great day at the office. He's obviously still very new at Chelsea. A lot of expectations on his young shoulders and all that, but also, Dortmund, and especially the players mentioned earlier, did a good job in putting stress on Fernandes and showing the few weaknesses he does have in his game, and not least of which, obviously, the goal, which I guess we'll come to later. But even if Chelsea's set piece defense wasn't as terrible as it was for Dortmund's goal, and the game possibly ends in a goalless draw or whatever, I think the takeaway is still that Dortmund's midfield kind of dominated the game in a way which you don't necessarily think about when you look at stats after the game, because obviously Chelsea had more of or more dangerous situations, had more shots, had more goal scoring opportunities, as it were. But I still think that on the balance of the 90 odd minutes, most people would agree that Dortmund's midfielders had a better game than Chelsea's.
Yeah, I do agree, actually, and that is actually a good news for Dortmund, because I would say that, as you mentioned, Jude Bellingham, I think he's just overplayed right now. He needs a bit of a breather, if we're honest, and same with I don't want to say Emre Can and Özcan, but obviously they are not the most skilled players in the footballing department, but I thought they did fairly well. What I did like is that when Chelsea sort of closed down Süle and Schlotterbeck in the build-up, that it was either Bellingham or Brandt often dropping back a little to be the open man, and from that perspective on, they managed to just turn around with the ball and oftentimes find Wolf pretty open on the right side and then combine on that right side into the half spaces. I thought we've seen this quite a lot. But as you said, what really did surprise me is how well Dortmund played, or how well Dortmund kept it together, considering some individual performances weren't quite on the level as they've previously been. I think most prominently Jude Bellingham, because we all know he can play much better and much more dominant. But in that case, you can also just, I think, say that it's quite or fairly normal that maybe things for Chelsea aren't clicking right away. I think they just need time. There's no amount of money that can make up for such a thing, especially when you talk about central midfielders. So from that perspective, I was just quite happy also that the Emre Can working as an anchor, I think is really proving itself to be quite useful now, because in several phases of the build-up, which in the first half of the season was a much greater issue, Emre Can is also versatile enough to drop in between the center backs or be a little higher up, depending on what he needs to do. And I think it really helps Dortmund out to progress the ball from their first line into midfield and beyond. And that to me is a bit of the ball game right now for Dortmund. And the more they are able to have a clean and structured build up, the better they get. And this is actually one of the things that I do see improving from game to game a little bit. I mean, Chelsea was maybe not the best example, but I did like it against Bremen as well, even though we will talk about it in a minute. Also not the most glorious performance, but I do think there are certain observations that you can take away that are certainly trending in the right direction. And of course, once again, I think Julian Brandt being in the form that he is in is just so valuable, because he right now makes very few mistakes. There was one giveaway that I remember that almost could have cost Dortmund, but other than that, I thought he had a lot of composure and did put a lot of pressure on Chelsea, and I'm very much looking forward to him in the reverse fixture, playing also maybe a bit more on the counter-attacking side, but I feel like he right now is also an absolute key player, especially when Jude Bellingham isn't playing his best. But apart from that, I must say I'm also quite impressed with Marius Wolf, and how he is finding other players in the half spaces. That gives me some Lucas Piszczek vibes, if I'm honest, but he can also play across if necessary. The other thing I just want to mention real quick is that you could see that Sebastian Aller is also a little bit tired, and I think with that you can sort of infer how much of a beast he's going to be if he's in peak physical condition. I mean, obviously you struggle against physically dominant defenders like Koulibaly or Thiago Silva, but nevertheless, I thought, given that he also looks a little bit gassed overall, did a fairly good job, and especially if you compare it to the, I don't know how many minutes it was in the end, run out of Anthony Modeste. I think it was like 22, 23 minutes. Yeah, we did not get much from Anthony Modeste other than a few clearances out of the box during set pieces. But Lars, I think it's time to talk about the goal and Karim Adeyemi, and I think I've talked enough, so that's your job now.
Once again, not necessarily sure how much we can talk about this, because while it was, I would say, the most iconic Dortmund Champions League goal since Felipe Santana, who was clearly not offside against Malaga. I mean, it was a 50 or 60 meter run, a nice curve of the goalkeeper, and tidy enough finish. But I mean, I hate to do this, but the obvious thing to talk about wouldn't be how great Adeyemi did, but how terribly Chelsea defended that. Because if you do a bit of opponent scouting ahead of a Champions League match, which I assume Chelsea have enough people in their employ to do that, they will know that Karim Adeyemi is the fastest player ever to have been clocked in the Bundesliga. He's even faster than Mudryk, who is the fastest Champions League player this season, by a tiny amount, but still. So you know that when you have a set piece, you kind of have to have what we call rest defense, or Restverteidigung, rest defense in English, and make sure that you are aware of where the fastest player on the pitch is, and they kind of weren't, and was reasonably comical to watch Enzo Fernandez try to stick with Adeyemi and offer him perhaps the outside. And to be fair, Adeyemi did really well. A lot of touches with his weaker foot, which is kind of one of the bigger strengths of Adeyemi, which is that he's not outside of shooting, I would say, which his left is clearly better for shooting purposes. But other than that, he's pretty two-footed. Yeah, but still, there's no way a top level team that spends again 650 million in 1 year can concede that kind of goal. It's if I were Graham Potter, I would be much richer, but I would also be very angry at myself, probably, because if I'm the head coach, that's my responsibility to set them up not to concede that kind of goal, but also even if you allow that run, you can't allow that goal. So Enzo and also Kepa, the goalkeeper, that was just not very good from Chelsea, but all the better for Dortmund. And still, I don't want to take anything away from Adeyemi, but I think you kind of have to put it into context a bit more than perhaps people were doing on the day.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very enjoyable goal. As you said, it was iconic. Yes, I think I will remember this goal for a very long time. And I'm just thinking about the first touch that Adeyemi had, which I thought was reasonably good. That Rafael Guerreiro cleared to take it down like this. So he definitely set him up for the second and third touch that really put Enzo Fernandez on the back foot. And the journalists that were at the game that had a better view, because watching on TV you see the goalkeeper obviously very late. They said that Kepa hesitated quite a lot and wasn't quite sure what to do, and sort of lost the ground he probably needed to close down Adeyemi quickly enough. But yeah, I'm just thinking about the future for Adeyemi, because if you have this kind of pace, you obviously will get more and more into 1v1 situations. We've seen it with Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang in his development at Dortmund, and obviously what a revelation it was for him once he discovered the lob over the keeper. I do wonder if this is something we will see in the future more of Adeyemi, that he will find these runs into the space in behind the back line. And obviously this was a counterattack, but there were just so many situations where Dortmund made the best out of Aubameyang's pace because he just had the timing, and obviously this is something that comes with experience, and Adeyemi is still quite young. But yeah, just a very enjoyable moment and just very enjoyable goal, unless of course you are Chelsea reporters sitting on the press stand because apparently they were all showered in beer and they were not happy. But you know what? That's football. It doesn't happen out of experience. I can tell you in the press box that often that there is beer raining down on you. But I guess in that particular moment, it did happen. And yeah, if you have a whole beer fall on your laptop or whatnot, I'm sure there are happier moments. But you know, it happens. Other than that, there was a little bit made out of the fact that neither Mats Hummels nor Marco Reus were subbed in. Obviously, I personally do not like the fact that Dortmund only used 3 of their substitutions instead of 5. But still, I've seen Ruhrnachrichten write something about it, that it was sort of a sign by Terzic. Is there anything to make out of this particular scenario or not?
I mean, if Dortmund hadn't won the game, I think the biggest regret from Dortmund's perspective would have been using 3 sub windows with singular substitutions, which is just not a very smart strategy this day and age. When you have the opportunity to make 5 subs, you take them. Because I could definitely tell a couple of guys that were in need of rest, or didn't have the freshest legs anymore. That said, I'm not necessarily annoyed with Hummels and Reus not being subbed in, because Hummels being brought in would presumably have been for a tactical switch, and we've seen too often that bringing on an extra centre back doesn't work for Dortmund. Even going back to the Klopp days, I think there's somewhat of a curse on Dortmund in that regard. And Reus obviously same age as me, so I know his problems in terms of foot speed, and obviously he's still coming back to full fitness from an injury or illness plus injury at the start of the calendar year. So it made sense to me that those 2 didn't come on, but I don't know why you wouldn't bring on, let's say, Daniel Mahlen just to make some runs. I mean, he might not be good for much else at this point, given by how little playing time he's receiving, but he's still got good speed and might have been able to offer some runs in relief of Dortmund's defense, which was solid and compact, but still, I just don't think it's smart to leave the opportunity of 2 extra subs on the table. Obviously, it worked this time around, but I think, especially remembering the Chelsea, the Man City away game in the group stage, I think they lost that game because they didn't bring on an extra runner in midfield. And I would have made the point that Terzic didn't really learn from that, because once again, he didn't bring on any extra fresh legs. So I don't know if that's, inexperience. I think that would be kind of disingenuous if I made that point, because, I mean, Terzic by now has, I think, almost 50 games as the head coach of Dortmund across 2 spells. He's also been around pro football so long now, so it's not like he needs to learn how to make substitutions. I think he just made the call that 3 subs was enough, because he didn't want to change too much about the structure of the game. And fair enough, it worked, but I still think I would disagree with that concept.
Yeah, no, I think if you bring on Dahoud, if you bring on maybe Marlon instead of Modest up front, and add a Gio Reyna, just to regain some midfield dominance, especially in the later stretches of that game, as you said, because Chelsea were really dominant. Dortmund hardly managed to take any pressure off. They just sort of, just punted the ball away for the next wave of attack. And yeah, I don't know. I just thought a few more fresh legs would have helped. Obviously, Marco Reus, I think, would have had too. I would have not really been happy with Mats Hummels, because he just lacks pace. I don't know. also don't really like to break up the center back pairing in any shape or form at this point of the game. I feel like it leads to some unstable minutes. Let's say. I think we've seen it against Bochum in the cup, where that happened as well. So from that standpoint, it is what it is. But I think Dortmund now have a pretty good result to go into the second leg at Stamford Bridge, and I do assume that Marco Reus by then will be probably more in the starting 11 because he's probably further progressed with his fitness. I don't know. Maybe we'll stick with the three midfield we have right now, but I do assume that Dortmund will play more on the counter-attack a little bit. Lars, if you want to preview that game real quick, I mean, by the time Dortmund played Chelsea, they would have just come off a game against Leipzig. Luckily for Dortmund, the Leipzig game is on Friday, so they have an extra day of rest, if you will, even though they do play on Tuesday. But the second leg is on the 7th of March, and I personally am looking forward to it. And I do wonder what the dynamic would be if Dortmund score another goal at the Stamford Bridge, because I don't know. I think the Chelsea crowd is not the greatest and might not really back their team as much as need be. But obviously, you can also just see the quality that Chelsea do have. So as you said, Dortmund will need a much better performance. But any tweaks from this game that you would like to see in the second leg that would make you more optimistic about the progression to the quarterfinals?
I think it's kind of pointless to have that discussion on or in the middle of February when the game is on March the 7th. I think it's pretty obvious that Terzic has this defensive-minded plan for big away games this season. So it's once again going to be Emre Can dropping between the center halves. I do not see necessarily Reus starting because it's going to be Bellingham and Özcan and Brandt, fitness provided, because they are a bit more robust off the ball, let's say. I think we are kind of kidding ourselves if we think of the tie now being much in Dortmund's favor, because once again, all other things being equal, Chelsea just having a bit better shooting performance, they win the game at Dortmund. Obviously, there's no away goals rule anymore, so the 1-0 isn't as valuable as it might have been a couple of years back. I think Chelsea, or playing Chelsea when they did, was kind of the perfect point in time, and it might not be the case for the second leg because Chelsea have been very bad in front of goal, and as we all know, the finishing pixie usually turns things around at some point during a season. I don't necessarily think it's likely that they will have that underperformance of their goal threat going forward to the end of the season. So if Dortmund once again allow this many opportunities, chances are Chelsea will make better use of them. So once again, Dortmund need to be much better than they were in the first leg, but I think there's also scope for that being the case because as we now talked about at length, or in depth, as you would say, there was a lot of room for improvement, let's say.
Yeah, I mean the one really good news for Dortmund is of course that they have Gregor Kobel in goal, and he has been tremendous. But obviously he can't stop anything either. But he said himself that he didn't really have a real highlight save. I mean the goal line clearance from Emre Can, I thought it was still a fairly good save overall because he was already diving. He was sort of speculating, diving to the right, and that shot went far central. And to then still get your arms to the ball while falling in the other direction. I don't know. I'm not a goalkeeping expert, so I don't really know if this is a good save or more luck than anything else. Because it, after all, would have landed in the net if it weren't for Emre Can's intervention, but that did just enough to allow a teammate have the chance to make the clearance, and obviously a huge push for the team to not concede that goal. And if we talk about the team spirit, maybe having a player that makes this sort of clearance is one of the many indicators for it. But I think we can't end the Chelsea game discussion without talking about Gregor Kobel and, of course, Emre Can making this goal and clearance, because that was pretty cool too. And I personally have been very harsh on Emre Can in the past, so it's just nice for him to shine a little brighter these days, and really help Dortmund out in many different ways. But let's talk a little bit about the Bundesliga, because as I mentioned, 7th win in a row, and that of course does include a 2-0 win away to Werder Bremen. Dortmund did take quite a while to open the scoring. It was Jamie Bynoe-Gittens coming off the bench, and I think it was pretty much his second or third touch. A nice run, let's say, a nice dribble by Nico Schlotterbeck to sort of penetrate all the way to the box and then lay it off to Jamie Bynoe-Gittens, who just, hit it quite blankly and was just bang, and was in there. Was no saving that from Pavlenka in the short corner in 67th minute, and then Julian Brandt, after wasting a couple chances, finally in the 84th minute with the dagger, and was 2-0. And I don't know what else to say other than was it the best performance again? No. Was it a deserved win? Absolutely. Did it feel like Bremen was going to mount another comeback as they did in the reverse fixture? Not really, apart from that one Dux chance they had, which they really created nicely. But I think overall, there are not too many negatives in that particular game. I think the biggest negative is obviously that Leo Bittencourt, destroyed Yusufa Mokoko's ankle, and he will now be out for 6-ish weeks. And apart from that, I'm fairly happy with that game. I mean, there you had Marco Reus and Jude Bellingham starting, and then you had Gio Reyna and Julian Brandt more on the outside positions. I wasn't quite impressed with Gio Reyna. I thought he had an average, game, but it's, he has so little playing time. And obviously starting from the beginning is a bit tougher than coming in as a super sub. But Lars, if you have any thoughts on this game, be my guest. If not, we can already move on to the Hertha match.
Not many thoughts. I think it was the kind of ho-hum performance good sides should have against opposition that doesn't quite reach the heights of their maximal potential. I think on the ball, fairly disappointing for the first 60-odd minutes. Got better in the second half, but kind of telling that the goal to break the deadlock and kind of decided the game almost, because Bremen didn't really have an answer after the Bynoe-Gittens goal. Telling that it came off what in German is called andribbeln, so the center back, as you explained earlier, just moving forward on the ball because nobody's really attacking him, and Schlotterbeck dragged that to the extreme with him kind of being in or close to the opponent's box, which usually isn't undribble territory anymore.
Not quite.
And very, very well taken goal by the Bynoe-Gittens. Second touch of the game, I think, is correct. I mean, the super sub stuff, I don't know if it's necessarily something that they can keep up over the course of the entire season, but then again, I think the first instance of Dortmund turning their games around with substitutions came against Freiburg. That was match day 2 or 3. So, I mean, as I said, a ho-hum performance against a Bremen side that can play much better. Nothing to go crazy over, but then again, at the start of the season, the one thing I wanted was for Dortmund to have more of these kinds of games where, it's not crazy drama, it's not hugely exciting perhaps, but just solid stability, bit of boringness. It's what they need, and obviously something to keep the winning run going, which is important as well. And I would almost say that it was one of the easier wins of that winning run, despite not playing well for the first 60 or so minutes. So I think that's kind of a general thought that I have, certainly, and others I presume will as well, is, they've won these 7 games on the spin, but I'm not sure that they were, much the better side in more than maybe 2 or 3 of those games. So one could argue that's a bit built on sand or whatever, but you could also make the case that it's a sign of a very good team that they keep just getting these results out of maybe 85% performance levels instead of needing 100 to win games, and that should bode well for the rest of the season.
I mean, on one hand, I think a 7-game win streak is rare for any team, even the best teams in the world. And on the other hand, any 7-game win streak very rarely is composed of absolute shellackings, where you just steamroll every opponent with absolute dominance, unless you're like peak Bayern or peak Barcelona. I don't think that happens quite a lot. Also always have to respect that opponents are competitive as well. And what is, I think, very encouraging, I tweeted after the Bremen game, is that from the then 6 wins, now 7, 4 of those came on the road. And since Dortmund's road form this season and in the past has been particularly poor, I would say, compared to their home form, I think this is also something that's encouraging. But of course, up next is a home match, and it is on Sunday, and it's the 5:30 game local time, and it is against Hertha Berlin, who just did beat Gladbach 4-1, but are in 16th place in the Bundesliga. And I think beforehand they had 4 straight losses against Bochum, Wolfsburg, Union Berlin, and Frankfurt. So not the most easy schedule, obviously. And the 4-1 win against Gladbach, I did watch it, was kind of weird because I think Hertha looked kind of meh for the most part, and Nico Elvedi did take the lead after 17 minutes, and Gladbach looked fairly in control, and all of a sudden they concede a goal and completely fall apart, and Hertha did take advantage by scoring 2 goals basically in the 30th and 52nd minute, and then I think having another 2 in stoppage time, garbage time, if you will. It was a weird game, and Hertha I don't know, they're just a very weird team, because if I always look at their team sheet, I feel like they should be higher up in the table, but when I watch their games, I usually think they should be even lower than they are, because they are very much unimpressive, and obviously this is very much a must-win game for Dortmund, because Hertha Berlin are just not that good, even though they just won 4-1. I don't think there's much of an argument there that Dortmund should not win this game. Obviously, you talk about the scoring pixie or whatever. These freak games can always happen, but from a Dortmund perspective, I would like to see win number 8 and to see it in a semi-controlled fashion. After all, it is a home match, and after all, it is a Sunday game, so there is an extra day of rest for Dortmund after the Champions League tie. But nevertheless, I also want to see some rotation. I do not know if I necessarily need to see Sebastian Aller starting or Jude Bellingham for that matter. And I think there are a few other candidates where you can rotate a little bit. And we have seen Terzic make changes to the starting 11 quite consistently throughout the 7-game win run. Lars, your thoughts on a potential lineup?
I actually don't think it's going to be too different from Wednesday, because there's a week off. They are in the thick of things. They should be reasonably accustomed to playing midweek fixtures at this point of the season. So I definitely think you kind of ride the wave as long as you can with Brand and Can. So them two starting. Adeyemi had 2 games off with suspension, so he's going to start. I would agree on Alea not starting, but if the alternative is Modeste, I think that's kind of asking for trouble, just because Modeste seems very much out of things at this point.
Scored the game winner in a reverse fixture.
Yeah, I mean that's the one thing that maybe there's some kitchen psychology, as we would say in Germany, to be had there. So maybe
Probably not.
Terzic tells Modeste, just do what you did. Because, I mean, at that point of the season, when they just signed Modeste and he had to play a lot of minutes because Moukoko wasn't quite ready, I think Modeste did much better than he has since, I don't know, October or so. I mean, he does miss chances. He does not have a good first touch, and he's just not a player that, is legitimately good enough to play for Borussia Dortmund, which, fair enough. They signed him in an emergency, and I can kind of understand that there's a few things you kind of have to accept coming with that. But I just think it's going to be Alea as long as he can. As I said, there's a week of rest. Possibly you can get him off after an hour again, which shouldn't be too bad. I mean, if I go through the entire thing, I think Kobel, I want to say Meunier possibly, but then again, that would be more rotation than I think. So it's probably going to be Riasson instead of Wolf, because Wolf just came back from an injury. Süle Schlotterbeck, no reason to change anything outside of placating Hummels, which I don't think is necessary at this point. Guerrero, Can. Since it's a home game, I think it might be Reus instead of Özcan. Brandt, Adeyemi, Aller, let's say Reina.
Okay, yeah, I do wonder if Daniel Malen will play as a number 9 at some point. I think Edin Terzic teased that today at the news conference, and Daniel Malen has not been in any good shape or form at all this season, but I mean, maybe it's helpful for him to play as a number 9 more centrally than to play on the wing. I'm not entirely sure. Obviously, be even more helpful if he could play off someone like Alea in a 2-striker formation. But if he has to play instead of Alea, I don't know. I'd rather go with him in a home game than with Modeste, if I'm honest, because at least he has some dynamism and can offer something. And I don't know why I naively thought that Anthony Modeste would have a somewhat decent, okayish, whatever you want to call it, hold-up play. But I think there are too many games that have proven that right now he just does not have, and doesn't really help Dortmund with any, ball control and then lay it off to a teammate sort of thing. Just not happening for whatever reason. And Dortmund's crossing is just not good enough to consistently find him in the box, and it's also just not the playing side right now. So I would actually argue more if you do not start Malen, do not start Alea, that you start Malen than Modeste. Even though I'm not the biggest Malen fan either right now, but I see a bit more upside in that scenario than with Modeste, if I'm entirely honest. And apart from that, I do hope that Dortmund have good board circulation, and that they do manage again to, develop some set piece threat, as they did against Freiburg, because that worked quite neatly. And apart from that, I do wonder if Dortmund are still as switched on as they would before a Champions League game, because we've seen it often enough that the focus and the speed of the game drops a little, and that sometimes bites Dortmund in the behind. But if I have to give a prediction, I would still I don't know, I'd go with a 3-1 or 4-1, something like that, because we must never forget the bench, be it Giro Reyna, be it Bynoe-Gittens or so, is always a factor. And if you're, I don't know, 2-1 up or something, then it can always quickly escalate in the final 20 minutes or so. And especially if you also have then, say, give Allian late half hour instead of the first 60 minutes, if you will. I think that also adds to Dortmund's attacking structure. So I can foresee a 3-1 or 4-1 win. What about you, Lars?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a funny, if you like, stat, because Dortmund are once again playing in special jerseys. It's another all-black kit.
Oh man, we should have mentioned that right at the beginning, because I did want to ask you how you like the special edition all-black shirt.
I like it reasonably well, but I think the first all-black edition was much better because of the Evonik sponsorship, which just looks better than the 1-1. The font is nice on the back, but I'm also not sure I like the silver as much as just a cleaner white. But
I thought it was gold initially, and then I saw it was silver, and I was kind of disappointed.
I mean, I guess it's supposed to be steel and not silver, but
yeah.
I mean, it's kind of hard to transport that in pictures. But the stat I was going to mention is that the first 2 times they played in special shirts was 2019 or 2018 in the first all-black kit against, it must have been 19 because Brandt was playing, against Fortuna Düsseldorf, I think 5-0 or 5-1. And then in 2021, the Neon 90s kit, a 3-0, I want to say, win against Werder Bremen. Might have been a 3-1. Anyway, convincing home wins against teams that at the end of the season were relegated. So if I'm Hertha, looking at the table, I think they're 16th after their win over Gladbach. Maybe I'm worrying a bit more after hearing that stat, but probably two isn't enough of a case study for that stuff.
Well, let's make it a case study then.
I mean, there's a saying in German which is thrice. It's not possible to translate. I'm not gonna even try.
Was it gonna be thrice is nice or what?
No, it's dreimal ist Bremer Recht.
Okay.
Thrice is law in Bremen, okay. I guess, but that doesn't really make sense in English.
I've literally never heard that, and it does not make sense at all to me.
No, I think it's to do with what we call Gewohnheitsrecht. So if something, for example, is grandfathered into new law, I mean, I quickly abandoned the idea of translating, and now you made me do it anyway. Anyway, I'm going with a why not? Let's say a 4-1 win for Dortmund.
Okay, all right. I can end with that. So again, everyone out there, thank you for listening. Don't forget to participate in the giveaway. If you don't have a Twitter account, make one. I don't care. It's easily set up. And other than that, Lars, again, thank you for coming on, sharing your insight, and everyone out there, I hope you have a great weekend and enjoy indeed a 4-1 win against Hertha Berlin. And we shall talk on the other side of then said 8th win on the bounce and preview a game against Hoffenheim. Yeah, that's it for this week. As always, again, thank you for listening and goodbye.